He steals Zuko's diary / notebook where Zuko writes about his love interest, aka Katara. Water. Earth. Fire. Air. Well, here we are, folks. It has finally arrived. I have waited since COVID, since 2020, 2021, 2019. That whole thing is such a blur to me. But I have waited since it was announced, really. If anyone knows, well, if anyone's like some creepy stalker, they would know that I posted some videos. Well, back when it was first announced, actually, it kind of awoke me from my slumber. Even now it woke me from my slumber. I mean, I haven't posted a video in how long, and suddenly here I am again because of Avatar. So here we are talking about the first episode. Without further ado, let's get straight into it. Actually, let's unfurther ado. Let's what's the opposite of further? Let's rewind ado, if that makes any sense whatsoever. I have watched the Avatar series, Avatar The Last Airbender, Avatar The Legend of Korra, multiple times over, probably 3 or more times over. Even so, I am going into this wanting something different. I want to be surprised. That being said, I don't want everything to change, but you know, I'm not expecting a one-to-one adaptation. I am completely open to change, which is kind of a central theme of Avatar, to be honest, but like, whatever, let's not get into that. So yeah, I'm anticipating something new, and also this will be sort of spoiler-free, I guess, because there are some people who have never watched Avatar before that might stumble across this video. So, you know, that's pretty cool if that's the case. Welcome. And I hope you watch Avatar because it's a freaking great show. So yeah, let's get into it. Right from the get-go, it diverges from the animated show. There's this earthbender who is kind of inside the Fire Nation, who went to, I guess, do some kind of reconnaissance mission, tries to escape because the Fire Nation is actually hunting him down because the Fire Nation is at war with all the other nations, meaning that they're at war with water, earth, and air nations. So this dude tries to escape. He ends up giving this message to one of his comrades. The comrade escapes, but it turns out that this information that he gathered was actually all a ruse. The information that he gathered being that the Fire Nation was about to launch an attack on the Earth Kingdom, so he sent that information to his buddy who went back to the Earth Kingdom, and this was all a ploy to get all military people defending the Earth Kingdom so that the Fire Nation could attack the air temples, because the air temples are where the Avatar lies, and the Avatar is the only person who can bring balance to the world and end the Fire Nation's tyrannical, genocidal reign sort of stuff. So this already is quite different from the animated series. In the animated series, you don't even really get much backstory whatsoever, aside from a few flashbacks and stuff that they talk about, but it's not really shown. So I thought this was a pretty neat touch, and in this scene, you also get a first peek of the bending, which I'm really happy that they did it properly this time, unlike the movie, where it was so boring and slow that it just wasn't interesting to even look at. This is so much more dynamic, fast-paced. It's overall so much cooler than the way it was portrayed in the movie. So pretty much from the beginning, my hopes were pretty high. I mean, this is 10 minutes into the episode, and they already accomplished so much more than what the movie did in terms of special effects, so congrats to them. Alright, then we pan out to the air temples where Aang is talking to Gyatso, which is his mentor and friend and teacher, I guess, all three. Once again, this whole entire scene that I'm about to talk about was not included in the animated series, but I do love the addition of it because it provides more backstory, allows us to get a little bit more emotionally attached with the characters rather than just telling us to feel sad because a genocide is about to occur, which obviously is very sad. I mean, sad is an understatement, but now we're able to connect with the characters to feel even more attachment, which is something really great. As we see his time in the air temple, we have this very controversial scene, which I've been seeing going around the internet recently, about Aang flying or gliding. Which is it? I am team he was gliding or falling gracefully through the air. You could see air on his feet. You see that he's kind of descending. He's descending slowly because of the air on his feet. This is kind of a controversial area for Avatar fans because in the sequel, The Legend of Korra, you find out that flying / not flying actually, it's more like levitating is a very rare ability, and people feel like Aang was levitating in this scene. I am team he was gracefully falling. So let's just get that out of the way. That's where I stand on that. Not relevant at all to the plot, but again, that is where I stand on that, so woohoo. So it turns out that there's this big event happening, which is I forgot actually what the name of the event was. It's like a comet, the Great Comet Festival or something like that. Well, pretty much, they just had to point out that all the airbenders were going to be there. In whatever air temple they're in, I don't know if it's the northern or the southern air temple. I don't think there's a western and an eastern. Maybe there is. No, I think it's only northern and southern. Whatever air temple they're in, there's this kind of comet festival happening where all the airbenders, and they make it very clear that it's all the airbenders because, spoiler alert, there's going to be a genocide of all the airbenders. They made sure to really put emphasis about how all the airbenders were going to be there. It did feel a little weird for me as a viewer because I felt like they're just really trying to drill it in how all the airbenders are going to be there. It's just a little bit too direct, I think. All the airbenders are gathering. At night, the Fire Nation attacks them and literally massacres everyone. I forgot to mention that in this scene, Monk Gyatso tells Aang that he's the Avatar, and Aang is not very happy with that. He wants to just be a real boy, or a regular boy. I think I just did a Pinocchio reference that didn't fit whatsoever. But he wanted to be a normal boy, but now he's kind of bearing the burden of all the Avatar stuff, you know, save the world and all of that stuff, and he's not fine with it because he just wants to continue living his life. So he kind of runs away. Now, as he runs away, that's when the Fire Nation attacks and kind of kills everyone. And you see some pretty graphic stuff. Well, graphic stuff for like a kid's show, I guess. I don't really think it is a kid's show necessarily anymore. You do see some dying, I guess. I did forget to mention, in the beginning, the spy there who kind of gave information back to his Earth Kingdom and whatever, he kind of got burned alive. So yeah, and you see his like corpse. Anyways, in the massacre, you also see corpses and stuff. Actually, there's this one girl who kind of does a tornado out of air to defend herself against firebenders. And then I believe it's Sozin. Sozin is the Fire Lord at the time, by the way, or some other firebender. He kind of blasts fire into her tornado and she kind of incinerates and cremates herself, and that was pretty dark, I feel. But yeah, they showed that. As that whole genocide is happening, Aang, he's on Appa, his flying bison. They're flying over the sea. They kind of get caught up in a tsunami. And then Aang, through the power of the Avatar State, which is this special power that only the Avatars have, hence the Avatar State, freezes himself in ice. And then we get to 100 years later. We pan out, or pan in, to Katara waterbending. She's bending a water bubble, I guess you could say, a water ball. Are water balls things? Water balls? That sounds like a familiar word. But she's waterbending this orb. She's waterbending an orb. That's what it is. Totally, it's an orb. In the animated series, Sokka, which is her brother, is fishing, and while he is doing so, kind of brings his spear up and with the back tip pierces the orb, and the water just kind of explodes on his head, or falls on his head, more like his head doesn't explode. And it's this comedic scene that is not included in the Netflix show. I was a little sad because the animated show is quite comedic, and this was one of those scenes where I don't know if I could say it was iconic, but it's pretty memorable. And the fact that they didn't include it kind of bummed me out slightly, but changes have to be made. It has to be a little bit more serious. So what? It's still great so far. But as they're fishing, they fall off their boat or something. Well, they enter through rapids and then they kind of jump on an iceberg? A sheet of ice. They kind of jump on a sheet of ice, and as Katara is waterbending the boat back to them, because if she doesn't waterbend the boat back to them, the boat's gonna flow away and they're never gonna be able to go back home. As she's doing so, she accidentally breaks this massive orb of ice behind her, and encased inside that ice was Aang. So she inadvertently breaks that big ball of ice, and Aang kind of unconsciously falls out because he's been frozen, suspended in ice for 100 years. So he's miraculously alive. They don't know why, but anyways, they bring him back to their village, and when he wakes up, he does a little bit of exploring, and again, he flies / levitates / gracefully falls because he does not levitate. People who are watching Avatar for the first time are probably like, why is he so worked up on this? But I'm not worked up. I'm just trying to clarify that he is not flying, because people seem to dislike the show because apparently it's going against these fundamental laws of avatarism or whatever the heck. Okay, it's a show, it's not that serious. So then Aang goes back to like the hut of the village where everyone is kind of gathered, and Gran, which is Sokka and Katara's grandmother, does the whole shebang about water, earth, fire, air. Long ago, the four nations lived together in harmony. Then, everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Only the Avatar, master of all four elements, could stop him. But when the world needed him most, he vanished. For anyone who doesn't know, that is part of the original opening in the original series. It's really funny how when Gran explains the whole history about what happened when Aang was submerged in the iceberg for 100 years, aka the genocide of the Air Nation, and how the Fire Nation is kind of conquering the world, she is really not holding back any punches. She is not sugarcoating anything. She is really trying to guilt trip Aang, or I guess she's just being honest, but at the same time, I found it really funny how she's just being very blunt. So, I mean, props to her, Gran. Good for you. Alrighty, while this is all going on, the anti-hero, Zuko, discovers the whereabouts of Aang via these glowing statues, which started to glow when Aang got released from the iceberg. So yeah, that happened. He kind of tracks Aang to the South Pole, the little village that Katara and Sokka live in, where Aang is staying in currently. He demands that the village gives him the avatar. The village is like, what avatar? We don't have an avatar. Sokka fights Zuko one-on-one. Sokka loses really badly. Then Aang appears to save the day. Turns out he couldn't save the day because there are too many liabilities there. Like literally everyone is a non-bender except for Katara, who also has to hide her bending because if she doesn't, then the Fire Nation is going to kill her, like they did her mom. So Aang surrenders. Zuko holds him captive in his ship. Aang escapes. He steals Zuko's diary / notebook where Zuko writes about his love interest, aka Katara. Just kidding, that didn't happen. Well, I mean, Aang did steal his notebook / diary. Well, it was more of a notebook, but the notebook contains information about avatars, not about Zuko's love interest. So yeah, Aang steals this notebook, jumps off the ship, kind of flies into the air, and then gets rescued by Sokka and Katara, who are riding on Appa. Zuko sends his fireball to kind of hit Aang so that Aang could like drop and, not run away. Or not fly away, I guess, in this sense. And then Katara summons this big water wall, which stops the fireball, and then they ride off into the sunset, concluding that they have to travel the world to help Aang master all 4 elements and save the world. Another point of contention with the fandom seems to be the fact that Katara was able to bend this big wall of water, even though she's a novice. And to that, I say, well, freaking boohoo, okay? They have 8 episodes. They can't show her being a novice and then going all the way to, like, waterbending masterness. She's gonna get shortcuts here and there. Let her bend this water wall. Let her bend stuff. So what if she's not a novice? Like, I know that her accidentally breaking the ice where Aang was trapped in, rather than inadvertently doing it through anger, kind of takes away from the fact that she has this undiscovered potential, and that this whole water wall out of nowhere kind of, again, negates the fact that she has this undiscovered potential. But whatever, I don't see it as much of an issue, okay? They had to cut some corners. This is one corner that they cut, and to me, that's totally fine. After they ride off into the sunset, which is actually just a random time of day and not actually sunset, they go to the air temple that Aang is from. While there, Aang sees Monkey Gyatso's skeleton, and he kind of loses it and goes into the avatar state because he can't control his emotions, and he's kind of creating this big dangerous tornado cyclone thing. And from what I understand, fans of the cartoon are also upset about this part, because in the cartoon Katara kind of brings him to his senses, and people see that as the beginning of the shipping of them two, as in Katang, as in Katara and Aang being like a couple. I was never one for the romance of Avatar. Honestly, I'll say something a little bit controversial, but I kind of like Zuko and Katara a little bit more. Oops. But yeah, despite Katara not being the one to get him out of his rage, I still think that this was a very impactful scene and it was very emotional, so the scene also deserved 2 thumbs up. Alright, final thoughts. The CGI was miles better than the movie that happened back in like 2010 or something. I don't really remember. Ooh, actually also back then we used to watch, by we I mean me and my siblings, we used to watch Avatar huddled around a computer on like this rinky-dink website. I think it was called hohoho.com or hahaha.com. I remember when Avatar came out in the cinemas, we all wanted to go watch it, but my sister's friend saw it before all of us did, and my sister's friend said that it really sucked. That kind of deterred us from watching it because she advocated very strongly against it, which I know why, because I mean I watched it afterwards online off these rinky-dink websites. And I say rinky-dink websites, I don't think it's as illegal in Canada as it is in the US. Like, I don't think I could go to jail. Don't quote me on this. Also, don't report this to the police or any authority because I don't want to go to jail. Back to the topic at hand. CGI was great. As for the character casting, I think they really nailed it on the head. Aang, I can't even picture anyone else now. He was phenomenal. The way he played Aang made me feel like he actually enjoyed what he was doing, and it just made me feel really connected with him. Katara and Sokka, also great castings. Sokka sounds like Sokka and kind of looks like Sokka. Katara acts like Katara, and it was just overall really great. Zuko also looks like Zuko. Uncle Iroh looks like Uncle Iroh. I mean, really, they nailed it on the head with every single cast member. So props to them and props to the casting directors because casting was on point. Even though I loved the CGI in the sense that I love the bending and stuff, because the bending was, again, really top notch, much more dynamic than the movie, I do feel like the landscapes looked a little bit too fake. Now, this episode takes place in the South Pole for the most part, and the South Pole exists, right? I do feel like it looked a little bit fake. I don't know if it was the glaciers or the water or like the sky, but something about it just did not look as real as I would like it to be, but that isn't so detrimental to my enjoyment of the show. So again, that's not really something that I would dock marks for. I overall honestly think that this was a 10 on 10 episode. I think that they really set up every character, or most characters, and they're able to go in any direction that they want to with how they made this episode, and I think it was a very freaking great way to start the series. Love the characters, love the soundtrack, love the bending. The writing / dialogue could use some improvement, but at the same time, again, it was very enjoyable. I do think it was a 10 on 10, or if not, like, I guess a 9.5 on 10, but really, overall, freaking great episode. I'm so excited what's in store for next episode because they really exceeded my expectations. I honestly don't think they could have done much better than what they did. Also, I unintentionally cosplayed as a water tribe person. I have the dark blue clothes and the white inside. I don't know what the heck this is called. The inside lining. Who knows? Anyways. So that was actually not intentional, it's just that it's very cold here and this is very cozy. And because I have no Avatar merch, I kind of stuck this Pokemon thing in the background because, well, I mean, in Pokemon they have air and water and fire and earth Pokemon, so I mean, they're pretty much all avatars in there. So yeah, I mean, that's inadvertently Avatar. If you like this random mess of a video, I would appreciate it if you could let me know in the comments and like the video, and stay tuned for the next episode review, which should be out shortly. Bye!